Hey everyone, my name is Eileen and I'm excited to be with you making an ornament today. It's a very cool project that Colorado is the state that gets to be represented at the Capitol. So we are going to be making an ornament that is the state cactus of Colorado, the Claret cup cactus, aka the king cup cactus. And I'll show you, this is like what we're going to be making today. This is my final prototype, hanging from the trees at the Capitol. So I designed this project so it's really accessible for everyone. It's really simple materials and you shouldn't have to spend much money on anything at all. Let's get started. Okay, so you're going to need a water bottle to start. And these can be any size or shape, really. The Claret cup cactus is something called like a barrel cactus. And so you kind of get the idea of like what the barrel shape is. If you look up any of the photos online, you can kind of get the gist of why I chose this specific water bottle. You know, if you have anything that is like this, kind of like rounded, that's kind of ideal. You can do it with a green water bottle if you don't have clear. But clear is the best because we can kind of be really specific about our paint colors. Okay, so to get started, we'll need, and I'm working on a cutting mat, so it's safe to cut on the table, but you might want to set yourself up either cardboard or something that's not going to cut through and damage your table. And parents, this is where you're probably going to want to help kids out. I'm going to use a box cutter. You could use a really stronger X-Acto knife if your water bottle is thin enough. There's different thicknesses of these water bottles, and so it can get a little bit, you have to just be a little bit careful to not slip. So I'm going to cut, and again, you can kind of make this your own and make it whatever size you want. Like I wouldn't go really long, and you don't want to go really short, but somewhere in the middle, you know? So one important thing to know is that at the end, we're going to want this line on the bottom to be really straight. So one technique that you could use is like using a piece of tape and kind of taping around the entire water bottle just to get a nice straight line on the bottom. Or if there's a sticker, like I can see there's a nice sticker here, it's kind of clear, but I'm just going to follow that line to cut it for my first cut. So here we go. It should just go really pretty easy. I'm just putting downward pressure on. Just again, be really careful with this phase. And if you do get a little bit of a jagged cut, we can always clean it up later. No big deal. Did pretty good. There's a little bit of a jagged cut. So I'm just actually going to take some scissors then and just kind of snip that part off. Take it off, glue off somewhere. It's pretty good. So it's sitting on the table like so. Okay, next step. So this is where you have a little bit of freedom to, if you want to cut this top part off, our flowers are going to be coming out of the top. So it all depends on what you want it to look like in the end. So for this guy, I ended up cutting the neck of the water bottle off completely to give it a little bit more room. If you want to keep the neck, it's really convenient to tie your ribbon around the neck and hang it up just like so. So you don't have to make an additional hole for it. But if you want to do all the steps, cut the neck off and it'll give you a little bit more room for the flowers to come out. So I'm just going to cut it right at the very base, right here. And this part is even a little bit more precarious than the first part. So I just need to be really careful, always cutting down and away from you. But once you get going, it's pretty simple, and you don't need to be too careful about making this straight because our flowers are going to cover up any mistakes or any jaggedness. Cool. Okay, so here we are. We have our shape, and this is what the ornament is going to be based around. So closing my box cutter, putting it off to the side. Okay, now we are going to start to paint. So you're going to need a smaller brush. I'm going to use one approximately like this size. It's quite small because we're going to be painting on the spikes on the inside of the water bottle. So I would recommend using a light color. You can mix a little bit of yellow into white and make kind of a tan, or just use straight white. But you really want it to contrast with the green because you want it to pop. So I'm going to put some paint down. So this gets a little bit interesting, and I think if you have smaller hands, this might be a little bit easier for you. So if you have kids, this might be a good section for them to do. I have big hands, and I had a little bit of trouble getting in there all the way. So in theory, you know, you could, if you're having a lot of issues, you could cut this in half and then re-glue it later, but you are going to see that seam at the end. So I'm going to try to avoid that and just do my best to paint the spikes on the inside really carefully. One thing to know about the Claret cup is that it's a 3-barbed bristle cactus. So that means every section has 3 little spikes that come out of one point. So you might want to be botanically accurate or not. You could make it your own. Another thing to note is that oftentimes the spikes will grow along a line down the cactus. So you might want to follow a line that makes it look a little bit more realistic, as opposed to the spikes being all over the place. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So start to paint on the inside. And I'm actually going to start at the top. 3 little spikes. And it's a little bit hard to see now, but once this gets filled up and it dries, we're going to paint over it with the green. So I'll kind of space them out. It gets a lot easier as you get lower, so that's why I like to do the hard part first. And if you can, just kind of lift your brush up. And again, this is a little tricky inside the barrel of the water bottle / cactus, but just try your best. And again, if you lift your brush up, it kind of gives the illusion of a nice spike. So if you work your way around the whole water bottle, that's what you gotta do. And if anyone has any questions, I'm able to see your questions in real time. So please don't be afraid to ask anything at all about this project. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that I just painted the spikes the whole way around this cactus, all on the inside. And I'm going to pretend that this is my final one. So this is one I did earlier, and we're going to just move on to the next step. We're kind of fast forwarding in time just so this doesn't take forever, but you do want your white spikes to be 100% dry before you do any of the green. It's really important that they're 100% dry, or else they'll smear, and then there's really not a great way to go back from there. So let's pick a cool color. I believe that the state cactus, the Claret cup cactus, is kind of a bluish green a little bit muted of a gray. So this is not the most accurate color, but I thought it was kind of a fun color. I like the contrast of the red and that green. So you can be creative in your own way. Again, reference photos online if you want to be a little bit more accurate. That's great. So I'm going to mix up enough green here to get me through to paint this whole thing. And one thing that I noted when I was making that is that I needed to do more than one layer of paint. So I kind of did one layer and it was a little bit streaky and I could see through it still. So I want this to ultimately be 100% opaque, so where you can't see the inside at all, because we're going to have some things that we kind of want to cover up in here. So you don't want to see through this water bottle. So in all honesty, I think this took me like 2 or 3 layers of paint. So that being said, you want to make sure that you have enough of the same color. If you're mixing your colors from scratch, like I am here, just make enough so you know you're going to have 3 layers, enough for 3 layers at most. Or if you're just using it right out of the tube, you don't have to worry about it. I'm going to try to get a little bit of a different green for this one, just to have something to compare it to. Put a little bit more of this turquoise in. Okay. Okay, so now I have a big brush. It's loaded up with paint, and I'm going to start to paint the inside of my 100% dry spikes that I've already painted on. And you can see right away, you can see that, you can see the contrast of those spikes coming through. So just get the paint in there any way you can and go right up to the edge. You can always wipe it off. You don't want anything to become see-through. So I've actually never seen this cactus growing in the wild, and now I'm going to have to keep my eyes open for it because I think it grows in gravel soil, so it's probably in the more desert parts of Colorado. But I know that it's a pretty stable population. I was doing some research on it, and it doesn't look like it's under any threat. And in real life, this cactus really, it doesn't get much bigger than 6 inches tall. So this is actually pretty like close to what it actually is. I think the most is like 2 feet. That's the biggest one they've ever found. Okay, so I did my first layer. Now I'm going to let it dry completely. So again, it's dry. Magic we do here. I've done 2 or 3 layers of my paint, of my green paint, and you can see the inside. It's ready to go to the next step. So I'm just going to set my brushes in the water here. And luckily, you know, in Colorado, things are so dry already, things do dry pretty fast. So it shouldn't take you too much time. You can always use a fan or a blow dryer if you're kind of in a rush. Okay, so what is next? I want to now move on to the flowers. So if you have anything like felt lying around or any kind of like sturdier red fabric, that's what I would recommend using. there's different thicknesses of felt with this, and it's nice because they kind of like stand up on their own and not like really floppy. So, and I have about, let's see, 1, 2, 3 to 4 different layers of flowers on top of each other. And I wouldn't recommend going much bigger than the size of like a silver dollar, just like maybe like 1 or 2 inches in diameter at most. You don't want it to be too big, or else it'll look a little funny, or too small, or else it might fall through this hole. So something to keep in mind. The way that this cactus grows in nature is it does have different layers, and it has kind of a rounded petal. So again, you know, if you do want to be a little bit more accurate, just take a look online. There's plenty of really great images of the flower, right? If you just like Google image search the claret cup flower. And I love it because it does get a little bit lighter, and then it has kind of like a cool green column in the center, which we're not going to attempt to do in this ornament, but if you really want to challenge, that might be a fun thing. So I'm going to start with this darkest color. I'm going to add a little bit more of a color gradient to this one, and I'm going to move on to this lighter orange, and then maybe a little bit of a white center for this version. So I like to just use a pencil and trace, but draw the flowers out beforehand. Felt can handle pencil pretty well. So I know where I'm cutting. I'm not wasting any more felt than necessary. Okay, so I have my flowers on there. I'm going to go ahead and just start cutting them out. And you can always, with this project, you always want to leave a little bit more than maybe you think you need, because you can always cut back, but it's very hard to add things back if you cut too much plastic off, or if you cut these too small. So I'm going to cut them a little bit bigger than I drew them, and then we can always go back and just kind of round them off and snip them to clean them up. So you can do this part while the green paint is drying, maybe in between your layers. You can start to work on the flowers. Okay, so I'm just going to make a little stack right here. And I think that this state cactus is a fairly recent addition into Colorado's state everything. I was reading online that it was actually a Girl Scout troop that like advocated for this cactus and had John Hickenlooper sign it into its official status. So it's a cute story, and it's a really sweet image of like these Girl Scouts with like behind the governor signing it in. And I love it. I love cacti. Okay. So I'm going to kind of offset them so there's different layers. I'm doing about 5 to 6 petals per flower, and then stacked up, they're going to create more petals ultimately. I'll do this last red one, a little bit of white, and then we'll assemble the flowers. Okay, I'm going to put the darkest one on the bottom. And again, you just work with what you have at home. Even if it's a little bit orange or a little bit purple, like, I think we'll still get the idea that it's cactus. And if you don't have any fabric, I mean, I guess you could try to do something with paper. I didn't attempt that, but it's totally possible. Okay. So I'm just going to do a little white center to give it a little bit more contrast. So I have my flowers kind of stacked up in layers. And on the bottom one, I could have made this a little bit bigger, honestly, so that you could see it more. I might even put that one in the middle. Just gotta adjust as you go. So my flower stack is assembled, and I'm going to ultimately put it on here and press it down a little bit. But first we need to sew these flowers together. I did a couple versions where I just glued them together, and honestly the glue, I would try to sew them. It's a little bit more, you know, it's just like more sure that it will stay together. But if you have really good glue, I have hot glue here. I also really love, like, this is my favorite glue, is tacky glue. So that's what we're going to use to kind of secure everything inside once it's done. So I have thread. You could use green for this because there is that green center of this cactus, which might be really cute. Or really any color would be fine. You just see a little bit of this. So I have my needle, just threading my needle here. And I'm not going to need much thread at all. This is really just to secure these flowers together. So I like to make a loop here, just secure the other side. However you do it is fine. And so I'll start from the top. I'm going to do the top layer first. So each layer I'm going to pick up individually and just poke a hole right through the center and then pull it through. And I have this kind of crazy looking, well, I'm going to trim that. I'm going to trim it so it looks a little bit more fun. And you can try to go through all of them at once, but I find it's just much easier to pick up each one and layer it like this. Okay, so I have my flower sewn together. Now I'm going to attach it to the cactus barrel. So I'm actually going to, I'm just going to stick my whole needle and everything through there and get it from the other side. You can take your needle out because we're not going to sew any more than that. If you want to do a couple layers up and down to just make it really secure, that's totally fine. I'm just going to kind of skip over that step for the moment. What I did with the other ones is push this down just a tiny bit to kind of give it the illusion that it's coming out of the cactus, that it's like actually blossoming out of it. So if you push this down just slightly, and then I'm going to secure this string. This has to be 100% dry, the green, before you do this next step. Just so this isn't floating around in space, I'm just going to take a really small piece of tape and just kind of tape the string to the side. And again, you're not going to see this at all, but it's just to kind of keep it clean. You can also glue this in as well. Both are possible. So I have it taped. I'm just going to snip that there, and I'm done with my string. So now I have the flower that's kind of pushed in a little bit to the cactus. Right now, what I want to do is make the hole for the hook where we're going to actually hang the ornament. So on this one, I don't know if you can see, I actually tied this gold cord, and you can use anything that you have at home. You could even use like something invisible like fishing line, or even just some twine or anything like that would be fine. But I like the gold for Christmas and the contrast. I tied a knot on the outside. For this one, I think I want to do it so you don't see that knot. So I'm going to make a little hole in this water bottle, and it needs to just be big enough to be able to put this through double, or one time if you're just going to tie the knot on the outside. And so I'm just going to make this tiny hole. And you can do this with like even a push pin or a needle or anything you might have around. And the way I like to make it bigger is just the tip of my X-Acto knife, if you have one, just kind of swirl it around and the hole automatically gets bigger. Not at a rate that's really alarming, but you're gonna need to fix. You can just kind of swirl that around and it gets bigger. Okay, so now I have a hole, very small little hole on the top of my cactus. So that's where it's gonna hang from. So I have this piece of, I'm just using like gold cord. I have this piece that I've already cut here. So I'll stick one end in and then the other. So we're gonna get a little loop like that, where we're gonna be able to hang it from the actual tree, or be able to attach a hook to this loop so we can hang it from the tree. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of a double knot inside. Again, if you have access to small hands, please use them, because this is a little tricky to navigate. But once you get it, you can just secure it with a little bit of glue as well. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Again, it can really be any length. This is just to give it something to kind of hook onto. So I did a double knot inside. And then I'm pulling this up, and this is a little bit smaller than my other one, and that's fine. Again, we can put a hook on it and it'll hang right from the tree. And I like the way that it looks a little bit more than seeing the knot. So something to consider. All right, let's secure all of this together. Hot glue is really convenient to use. I find that I don't like it for like duration, like long lasting things. So I'm going to use this tacky glue here. And I'm going to just put glue around the edge of the felt, around the string, and at the very base of the gold cord, just to kind of secure everything in place, okay? So you can even hold the bottom, be sure not to press. And I don't think I can even reach my whole glue bottle in there, so I'm just gonna drizzle a little bit more than I think I need and let it dry completely. And you want your flower to be in its final location before you do that, because it's kind of the very last step to glue everything inside together before we close off the barrel. Okay. So I have an ample amount of glue in there, a little bit more than I think is necessary. And I'm going to let this dry like this. If you have something to prop it on, you can also just hold it dry. You can put it on its side. If you put it like this on its bottom, it might drip a little bit, and that's still okay. But ideally, you want it to kind of dry in this position, and so all the glue is seeping into the fabric and connecting it to the barrel. So here we are. I'm going to pretend that this is all dry and ready to go before we finish off the final step. And if you don't have time to do the bottom, you know, this still looks really cute on a tree, but you can kind of see the inside. And I'd like to seal that off so you don't see anything. So on this one, I just used kind of this like thinner cardstock. It really isn't, I'll try to show you, it's just something like this. But for this one, I would like to try to use felt instead. And I'm going to use brown just to have something different and a different version of it. So what you're going to do is grab your felt or your paper or whatever you want to use to kind of seal it off. And just use whatever you have on hand. Don't need to go out and buy new things for this. And you're going to place the cactus on a flat surface, and you're going to trace the circumference of the cactus. And know if you're working with a really thin water bottle, any kind of pressure is going to alter it. It's going to kind of warp inward. So try to just, from the very top of it, put downward pressure on it so you're not altering the shape, so you get a really true impression of the circumference of the cactus here. Okay, so I have that. Now I'm just going to cut out this circle. And you can use brown, you can use green, you can have it match, you can have it totally contrast. You could even probably paint something on the bottom like Colorado, love, 2020, put the date on it. Because this is kind of a little bit of a hidden thing here. Okay, so I have the bottom, which perfectly matches on here, and it's going to kind of seal everything up, everything inside. One thing to note, if you are going the toothpick route, which I'm not going to demonstrate today because it does take quite a bit of time and commitment to do that, but the result is really cool to see the toothpick sticking out. But you're going to want to do that step before this because you want to seal everything inside. If you're doing the hot glue method for spikes, and again, this is all optional because I kind of like it just as is. You don't really need the spikes, but if you want to make it more three-dimensional, you can do that after this step. So I'll go ahead and show you. And again, make this a little bit bigger than you think you might need if you're having doubts, because you can always trim it away after the glue is dried. Even on a flat surface, you can trim it away with an X-Acto knife, a cutter, or just scissors. So I'm going to take my glue, and I'm just going to glue on the very edge of this, kind of going around the very bottom of the perimeter. I'm giving myself a good amount of glue again. All right. And so, you know, now that this is dry, we don't have to worry about that. And we can just set the entire cactus right up on the bottom there and wait for that to dry. And if you give it enough time to dry, then you can pick it up and kind of clean up the edges a little bit. So that's that. And then, okay, kind of fast forwarding in time, I'm going to let that one set. And I will kind of demonstrate this hot glue over here. So I have my hot glue gun already plugged in and ready to go. I have it on the hot setting. And yeah, just be careful if you have young hands around not to burn. And I'll just show you how I do the little spikes if you want to do the hot glue spikes. They're kind of fun. They look cool. So I'm just going to go to the base of one of the barbs, my painted barbs, and do a little dot of glue. And I'm actually going to kind of do this like upside down because you want the hot glue to form a spike with gravity, right? And so I would definitely practice on like a throwaway, this is like my first attempt at this, a throwaway water bottle, or anything, just to kind of get the technique down, because it took me a few tries to kind of feel like I understood what I was doing. So I'm going to do a little dot of glue here. And then let it form and then kind of coax it down slowly. You might need to kind of go back and add a little bit more to make it thick enough. And it's kind of pulling down. And this takes a little bit of time, but you can't really do much to rush this process. I'm not even sure if you can see this because the glue is a little bit invisible. But there is indeed a spike that's formed on the outside. So I'm going to do just a few more. So just keeping it really accurate and getting a nice dollop of glue and then just kind of coaxing it down. And I think at first I didn't do enough glue and it looked really wispy. But now I know you kind of have to go back and you're slowly kind of drawing the glue down and down to form a spike. And at some point it'll just kind of break off. And you have to kind of hold it long enough to where it cools in the air like this. I'm having a really hard time seeing if this is visible on camera, but practice on your own doing this, and you can always cut your spikes a little bit shorter if you want them to be a little bit shorter. And so then if you go around, you do the whole thing. I don't have a finished one to show you, but that's the technique behind the hot glue spikes. Yeah, just remember to do it so the gravity is actually forming the spike, and then to hold it long enough so it has time to cool, and then you'll be good. Because when I'm holding this up now, those spikes are sticking straight up, straight to the side. And that's it. This is the final version. I hope you enjoy making these with your family, with your friends. It's a really fun process and really accessible. Anyone can do this. It's just acrylic paint and water bottle, little string, little glue, little fabric or felt, and then finally something to suspend it on the tree. So once you're done with your ornament, check out the Facebook page, and there's thorough instructions on how to package it, address to send it to, and I'm excited to hopefully we get some to represent Colorado through this little Claret cup cactus. So good luck, make ornaments, and have them out. I think they're due September 1st, so don't have a whole lot of time, but we did this in one evening, so you can too. So I hope you have fun, and thank you so much for tuning in to watch. Again, my name's Eileen, and I hope to see your cactuses online. Bye.